Welcome to the Echo Lab, the place where music's best-kept secrets come to light. In every episode, we uncover the overlooked legends, the underground classics, and the hidden influences that shape the soundtrack of generations. From cult bands and iconic session players to the untold stories behind timeless tracks. If you're a fan of deep cuts and deep dives, you're in the right place. Make sure to like, subscribe, and follow so you never miss a beat. Let's get into the story behind the sound. Mama Cass, the voice of harmony. You know, when people talk about the 60s folk rock explosion, the conversation usually drifts to Bob Dylan, Joni Mitchell, maybe Joan Baez, or even the Byrds. But there's one voice, rich, warm, unmistakable, that doesn't always get the spotlight it deserves. Cass Elliot, or as the world came to know her, Mama Cass. Cass was born Ella Naomi Cohen on September 19, 1941, in Baltimore, Maryland. And if that name doesn't sound like it belongs on a stage, well, she figured that out too. Her parents were working class. Her dad, Philip, ran a deli that barely stayed afloat, and her mom, Bess, was a nurse. Their row house was modest, but it was filled with music. Philip had a scratchy old phonograph that played South Pacific on repeat, and Bess would hum Yiddish lullabies while folding laundry. That's where it began for Cass. Not in a studio or a club, but in a cramped house full of dreams and dishwater. She had a big voice, even as a little kid. At 6, she joined the synagogue choir. Her voice? Deep, lush, soulful. "I'd sing until my chest ached," she once said. That wasn't just poetry, it was her truth. Even back then, you could tell her voice had something rare. Something. Full. But childhood wasn't easy. Cass was a bigger kid, with wild curls and a sharper wit than most adults knew how to handle. And kids? Well, they weren't kind. They called her names. They teased her about her weight. So she hid, physically and emotionally. She'd retreat to the library, getting lost in Tennessee Williams plays, imagining herself in roles no one thought she fit. "I felt invisible," she later said, but she had this incredible ability to use humor like a shield. "My mouth was my weapon," she joked, and man, she could win a room with one well-placed line. At 15, she discovered folk music. Pete Seeger, Woody Guthrie. Their songs weren't just melodies, they were messages. And for Cass, they were escape routes. She borrowed a guitar and started strumming in her bedroom. Her voice, by then a mix of Ella Fitzgerald's warmth and gospel choir power, filled the house. That's when the dream started feeling less like a fantasy and more like a calling. She didn't stick around Baltimore long. At 17, she dropped out of high school and made her way to New York City. It was 1958, Greenwich Village. Folk music was everywhere, on street corners and smoky cafes, in the cramped tenements where dreamers lived on tips and coffee. Cass found work as a coat-check girl at the bitter end, watching legends in the making from the shadows. "I'd carry coats, dreaming of the stage," she said. She started auditioning for Broadway, even landed a few small parts in The Boyfriend. But directors couldn't see past her size. Too big, they'd say. It didn't matter that she could outsing anyone in the room. But Cass, she didn't shrink. She leaned in, flowing dresses, big scarves, bold colors. "I decided to be unforgettable," she said. She wasn't going to blend in. She was going to stand out. Her style was part protest, part personality, and all Cass. Around that time, she started making noise literally in the village folk scene. She sang in coffee houses, covered Joan Baez, added a little jazz phrasing, a little soul. It didn't sound like anything else on those stages. In 1963, she joined a group called the Big Three, just her, Tim Rose, and Jim Hendrix. They gigged around, made a live album. It didn't sell a ton, but you could hear it. That big, emotional voice carrying every song. She followed that with another group, the Mugwumps. The name was weird, the gigs were rough, but the music had energy. She was harmonizing with guys like Denny Doherty and Zal Yanovsky, names you'd hear again soon. "We were broke but had fun," she said, and you can believe it. It was a scrappy, starving artist time, playing to a dozen people in dingy bars. But even then, Cass stood out, not just for her voice, but for the way she connected with people. She sang like she meant it. And then came the twist. In 1965, she crossed paths with John and Michelle Phillips. They were also in the folk scene, looking to put a group together with Denny Doherty. They had this idea, lush harmonies, male-female blend, California folk pop with a twist. And they invited Cass to join them in the Virgin Islands, of all places, to work on the sound. Cass hesitated. She thought they'd laugh her off. "I thought they'd reject me for my size," she admitted. That insecurity never fully left her. But when she sang, it stopped everything. It didn't matter how she looked. Her voice was a band. On a beach in a makeshift shack, they built something magical. Harmonies that wrapped around each other like vines. John dubbed them the Mamas and the Papas. And just like that, Cass became Mama Cass. "I was the mom, keeping him sane," she laughed later. And yet, it fit. She was nurturing, grounded, the emotional glue when tensions ran high. But behind the smiles, she still battled out. She watched Michelle, beautiful, tall, graceful, and feel like the odd one out. So she fought back with humor, with bold dresses, with a voice that made you forget every insecurity she ever had. In a world that wanted women to be small and delicate, Cass was unapologetically big and bold. In 1965, the Mamas and the Papas signed with Dunhill Records, and by early '66, they dropped their debut, If You Can Believe Your Eyes and Ears. That title, by the way, says everything about them: playful, provocative, and just a little self-aware. Their first single, California Dreamin', written by John and Michelle, hit number 4 on the Billboard charts. But it was Cass's voice, anchoring those harmonies, that gave it soul. Her voice gave it gravity. One review said at the time, she wasn't the lead on every song, but when she was front and center, goosebumps. Then came Monday, Monday, a chart topper that won them a Grammy. Cass's phrasing was so smooth, so jazzy it felt effortless. But it wasn't. She worked at it. She once said, "I wanted us to sound like one voice." And honestly, they kind of did. That blend, her contralto under Denny's tenor, was pure magic. In '67, they released Creek Alley, basically a musical autobiography. It told their story, struggles, gigs, band drama. "I wrote our truth," Cass said. That's what she did best. She brought truth into every lyric, every note. By then, the Mamas and the Papas were huge. Touring, selling millions, showing up on TV. But it wasn't just the records, it was Cass herself. That vibrant laugh, those psychedelic gowns, her full-on presence. She redefined what it meant to be a woman in music. She didn't whisper. She didn't wait her turn. She took the mic and owned it. By 1967, the Mamas and the Papas were everywhere. Their harmonies had become a sound of a generation. Soft, psychedelic, a little sad, a little dreamy. And right in the center of it all was Cass. That voice, that grin, that sense of humor that could cut through even the tensest backstage fights. And there were plenty of those. John and Michelle's marriage was unraveling. Michelle was having an affair with Denny Doherty. Yeah, the same Denny who stood next to Cass on stage every night. Things got messy. Emotions ran high. And Cass? She tried to keep the peace. "I'd make him laugh to stop the yelling," she said once. And she meant it. She was a buffer, the balm, the glue that kept the group from falling apart faster than it already was. But while the band's success kept growing, so did Cass's inner turmoil. The spotlight was brutal. People praised Michelle's beauty and seemed to overlook Cass entirely. "I felt invisible," she admitted. Even fans who loved the music would fawn over the others and leave her out of the conversation. That kind of thing cuts deep when you're already carrying years of insecurity. So she did what she always did. She sang harder. She laughed louder. She made herself unforgettable. She wore huge scarves, bright muumuus, feather boas. She flirted with audiences, owned the stage, challenged every idea of what a frontwoman was supposed to look like. "I'm not what they expect," she once said, "so I'll be more." And that's exactly what she was. More. More charisma. More soul. More truth in every note she sang. And when she joked about her size on talk shows, like she did on The Smothers Brothers or The Tonight Show, it wasn't just for laughs. It was armor. It was her way of controlling the narrative before anyone else could. But behind closed doors, she hurt. She cried. "I'd think no one loved me for me," she confided to close friends. By 1968, the band was falling apart. The drama, the pressure, the emotional weight, it all took a toll. But Cass, she was just getting started. That year, she went solo. Her first album was Dream a Little Dream, and if you've heard the title track, you know that smoky, soft jazz version of the old standard, that was Cass stepping into her own. No longer 1/4 a harmony. Now she was front and center. The song hit number 12 on the Billboard Hot 100. 500,000 copies sold. It wasn't just a hit, it was a statement. She wasn't just Mama Cass. She was an artist, a force. She started doing shows at the bitter end again, returning to the tiny club where she once checked coats. This time, the crowd chanted her name. Mama Cass, Mama Cass. And she'd walk out in a flowing gown, barefoot sometimes, her voice filling the room with nothing but a piano behind her. Intimate, powerful, real. Her second solo album, Bubblegum, Lemonade, and Something for Mama, came in '69. It blended pop and soul, fun, flirty, full of charm. The standout? Make your own kind of music. That one hit number 36. But more importantly, it became an anthem. Sing your own special song, even if nobody else sings along. That was her mantra. A battle cry for every misfit, every outcast. "I sang for every misfit," she once said, and you could feel it. She played Vegas. She sold out London's Palladium. She released The Road Is No Place for a Lady in 1972. More jazz, more storytelling, more vulnerability. Her final solo single? Don't Call Me Mama Anymore. The message was clear. She was tired of the nickname, tired of the box people kept putting her in. "I'm more than a label," she said. And she was so much more. But the world didn't always treat her that way. Tabloids were cruel. They mocked her weight, called her the Fat Mama. And even though she laughed it off in public, those headlines hurt deeply. She battled with diets, crash diets, amphetamines, starvation regimens. At one point, she lost 100 pounds in a year. It wrecked her heart. Years later, doctors would say it strained her body more than people ever realized. In 1967, she had a daughter, Owen Vanessa. She kept the pregnancy quiet, worried how promoters and the public would react to a single mom in the spotlight. But once Owen was born, Cass gave her everything. "I'm her everything," she said. And she meant it. She raised her daughter alone, with fierce love and no apologies. Through it all, she kept performing. Her stage presence only grew, bigger, bolder, more fearless. She'd twirl barefoot on stage at the Hollywood Bowl, belting to 10,000 people like it was a tiny jazz club. She was fully herself, fierce, funny, radiant, and her impact, massive. The Mamas and the Papas sold over 40 million records. Their harmonies defined a sound. And Cass inspired everyone from Joni Mitchell to Stevie Nicks. Norah Jones covered Dream a Little Dream decades later and called her a major influence. Christine McVie once said, "She was our voice." And Melissa Etheridge? She called Cass a trailblazer. Her influence wasn't just musical, it was cultural. Cass broke down walls just by existing in the spotlight. A plus-size woman in a mixed-gender band that alone challenged everything people thought they knew about pop stardom. She didn't just belong, she thrived. And then, too soon, it ended. On July 29th, 1974, Cass died in her sleep in a London flat. She'd just wrapped 2 sold-out shows at the Palladium. She was 32. The rumors came fast. Stories about choking on a ham sandwich. Total garbage. The truth? She died of heart failure. A heart that had endured crash diets, stress, and years of pushing past every limit thrown in her way. Her funeral drew 1,500 people. Fans left flowers on her Hollywood star. Her solo album sold millions more posthumously. In 1998, the Mamas and the Papas were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Her daughter, Owen, accepted the honor for her. And in 2020, Owen published My Mama, Cass, a memoir that finally gave Cass the spotlight she always deserved. Cass Elliot wasn't just a mama. She wasn't a punchline. She wasn't a sidekick. She was a powerhouse, a rebel, a voice that could make you cry, dance, laugh, or heal, sometimes all at once. She sang with heart. She lived out loud. And she left behind a sound that never fades. Thanks for hanging out with the Echo Lab. Whether you're listening on your favorite podcast app or watching on YouTube, we appreciate you being here. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to follow, subscribe, and drop a review or comment to let us know what you think. Got a band, topic, or a deep cut you want featured? Shoot us a message. Until next time, this is the Echo Lab, where we dive into the story behind the sound.